my esteemed honor to have this gentleman here with me today on the Power Transformation Podcast. And that is none other than Alan Underwood. Now, I'm going to tell you, Alan has definitely a resume, experiences, all of that. This man is phenomenal. But what you may not know are a lot of the behind the scenes experiences that have shaped Alan into who he is today. And Alan, it is my honor to have you as a guest here on the Power Transformation Podcast. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. It's really my pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So, look, I always like to start off with a nice, lighthearted icebreaker question. It usually doesn't have anything to do with the guest's topic or themselves, but for you today, it's going to be a little different because you do something that I think is really cool, and I would love for you to tell us how you got into that. So, Alan, this is your icebreaker question. What is it that you love the most about flying?
Ooh, what do I love the most about flying? Well, that's kind of like picking a favorite ice cream, right? It's difficult to choose what you love the most. But I can give you a few. I love the perspective. So you get up above the earth, and all of a sudden, opportunities seem bigger, problems seem a little bit smaller. I love the freedom that comes from aviation. I can get in the plane, and from there, it's to choose your own adventure. I can head to the Grand Canyon or to San Diego to see my son in Denver. Really unlimited options. As far as the fuel will take me, I can go. Um, and one of the things for me, and maybe this isn't true for every pilot, but I also love the way that I can use aviation to impact others. And that's in business sometimes. Other times it's, you know, people that have just always wanted to fly, and I can provide that opportunity. But I also lead a nonprofit in Arizona where we do free non-emergency flights for people in need. And that can be somebody who's traveling for specialized cancer treatment,
Mhm.
victims of domestic violence and abuse. I got a call actually just last week that was really meaningful for me. I got a phone call from a friend who runs another nonprofit in town, and this lady is amazing. Somebody that I really should connect you with.
Okay.
Um, she helps 1,200 families a year who are dealing with childhood cancer. She helps
Wow.
them with their finances. She helps with all kinds of different therapies, whether it's massage therapy or music therapy or counseling,
Mhm.
really to help the whole family in that journey. And she called, and she had a 16-year-old young girl who, unfortunately, her fight with cancer was going to end, and
Mm.
she was going on to hospice, but she'd always wanted to go flying. And
Wow.
so my friend Lorraine reached out and just said, "Hey, Alan, would it be possible to schedule a flight for this young lady?" And of course, that was something that I was very excited and anxious to arrange for this young girl and her family. And so for me, what I can do for others with aviation is my favorite
Mm.
thing.
Wow, what a story. And that is an amazing way to start off the show. And thank you for sharing that because it goes to show that it's more than just a self serving hobby. It's something that you do, and you've built, of course, a business with that as well as other things. But it's really about giving back. And that leads me to ask this core question about you as the man, the person, the human being. Who is Alan Underwood?
Oh, what a great question. And I think there was probably a lot of different answers along the way.
Yeah.
Um, First and foremost, I'm a child of God. So
Mm.
we'll say that first. I have a deep faith, and that informs a lot of what I do. I'm a husband. I've been married for 26 years. My wife and
Wow.
I have actually known each other since like the first grade. So we have
Oh, how cute. Oh, I love it.
never thought we would end up married together. In fact, we kind of joke that we that we got married and then started dating afterwards because we had such a long history of knowing each other.
Mhm.
I'm a father, have 8 kids, so
Wow.
5 girls and 3 boys. I'm a grandfather 2 times over, and that's a lot of fun. I'm a pilot, and what I hope that I am is a giver. One of my favorite books in the world is The Go-Giver. And the basic philosophy of that book is that you show up in any situation where you're at with just really one question is, what can I give?
Mhm.
And I have found that by showing up in business relationships, personal relationships, with coaching clients with that question, that it really helps me to um, find what other people need and
Mhm.
adapt, use my talent, skills, resources to help them get what they want. And I love
Mm.
doing that.
I love that too. And congratulations for you and your wife being married so long. And it's beautiful to know that you've known each other since you were little tykes, little tiny tot
Yeah.
kids, you know what I mean? That is so incredible. And also, I will have to say, Alan, I've never asked your age and I won't, but when you hear grandfather, you think of somebody that looks older. Either you have great genes or you were a young grandfather, because I never would have thought you had grandkids. I know that you told me about your kids, but I didn't think you had grandkids yet. So kudos to you and your wife for being the young, cool grandparents. That's all I'll say
Yeah.
about that.
I
But
appreciate that.
of course, of course. Now, we know who you are, but tell us a bit more about what you do and how you serve people. We know that a part of that is you as a pilot, but there's so many other layers to you. So tell us a little bit about your background. And then from there, I'm going to go more into the heart and the core of what our show is all about. But what do you do, Alan?
I'm going to give you, let's say, 4 things
Hmm.
where these are the primary focuses right now. As an entrepreneur or maybe someone with business ADD, that could change next week. So,
It sure can. We
uh,
know how this game works with entrepreneurship. And it's okay to pivot and to shift. We do it all the time.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So, my main occupation right now is I run a private investment company called Momentum Capital, and we help people build wealth by investing in real estate projects that we're doing in San Diego, California. In essence, we allow people passively to invest, and then we develop property in San Diego. So that's what I do professionally. We touched a little bit on philanthropically what I do. That organization is called Angel Flight West. Angel Flight West has about 2,000 volunteers across the 13 Western states. I lead the Arizona volunteers. We have 250 or 300 volunteers here that I lead. I'm a public speaker, so I love getting in front of crowds. I'm one of those crazy people that gets excited by standing in front of a large audience and speaking. And then in addition to that, I'm also an executive coach or a high performance coach. So I help people discover who they are, create a vision for who they want to become, and then I help them with the tactics and strategies to execute
Wow.
on that transformation.
Exactly. And I think it's so important that people are guided on who they are. I think that there's so many people walking around, regardless of age, but really don't quite know exactly who they are. Maybe they are living lives everyone else wants them to live, or maybe at one point they fit a version of themselves that was suitable. But as time goes on, people evolve, change, and grow. So take us back, Alan, to a part of your upbringing in your childhood. Where are you from? And did you always have this type of entrepreneurial and serving spirit? And how did that show up in your youth and adolescence?
Great question. And I don't know that anyone's ever really invited me to go back into my childhood and look at
Hmm.
that. So this is fun. The entrepreneurial, I think, started early, although I I really hadn't connected that until you answered this question. But I can
Mm.
remember at 7 or 8 years old selling greeting cards door to door.
Wow.
And I'll tell you how that business venture went because it didn't go well. I sold a bunch of greeting cards. That part went really well, but I hadn't ever really had success that way financially. So I went to the door, offered, showed somebody what I was selling. They would write me a check or give cash, and then I was supposed to bring the greeting cards back. Well, I calculated what I thought the profit was going to be off the sale of those greeting cards. And then in the small town where I grew up, it was Wickenburg, Arizona. This was not even a one stoplight town. We had a one stop sign town. And
Oh.
so, but there was a McDonald's. It was on the other side of town. And I rode my bike to that McDonald's and spent the profits of that one day greeting card sales on a Coke and an ice cream cone, and actually exceeded my profits. I didn't know that until later, that I didn't have enough money to buy the greeting card. So then I had to do some chores for my parents, and they helped me, fulfill the obligations I had to these people that had trusted me to buy a greeting card. So that was my first venture into entrepreneurship. I had a paper route later. I I worked just about full time beginning
Mhm.
really at 11 or 12 years old. I was, yeah, my dad managed a small car dealership, and I would go in after school and take out the trash and wash cars and stuff
Mm.
like that. So for as long as I can remember, I've been doing different things. And then where that really kicked off was later when I was 22, I opened a restaurant. And it- ever since then, for the last 26 years, I've owned my own
Mm.
business.
Wow. Now, in terms of this restaurant, how did you get into that restaurant industry and what did it teach you about yourself? I'm sure there were some valuable lessons that you learned in that specific industry. And I ask because my first entrepreneurial venture in my 20s, I did catering and I loved that. I didn't want everybody said, you need to open your own restaurant. I didn't want to. It's a huge difference between catering and having a restaurant. It really is. Some
Yeah.
can do both, but I always knew I was not cut out for a restaurant, but catering, great, even though I went to culinary school, everything. But how in the world did you get into that? And like I said, what did it teach you about yourself?
So I got into it. I was managing six subways for a friend,
Oh,
and he
wow.
saw this restaurant concept that he wanted to do.
Wait a minute, 6 subways?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Uh-huh.
And so he asked me to go check out this concept, and it was a pizza buffet, and I loved the idea. But with my background, Subway's very organized, has great systems and processes.
Mhm.
This entrepreneur didn't have great organization or systems or processes, and I could tell that just by sitting in the dining room and paying attention. And so for about 6 months, went just about every day, and I would take a yellow sheet of paper and I would just write down how we could do this and how it could be better. I would sit out behind the restaurant, watch delivery trucks come in.
Mhm.
And looking back, it's kind of surprising to me that at 22 I was doing any of this. It seems ahead of my age,
Mhm.
but it didn't seem unusual at the time. And after 5 or 6 months, I thought, this is a really great idea. We can improve upon it and make it better. I had even found some locations that I thought would work well. And I
Mhm.
went back to my friend and I'm like, hey, we should do this. Here's what I think we can do to make it better. And he said, I don't think that's something that I want to pursue, but I'd already sold myself on the idea. So then I went
Mhm.
to my dad and pitched him the idea. I didn't know that I was pitching. I just was sharing.
Yeah.
And he said, well, you should call your uncle. He's done restaurants before, see what he thinks. So I called my uncle and he said, Alan, don't ever go into the restaurant business.
Oh.
And because I was really wise at 22, literally the thought that I had was, well, I'm going to do it different. So you don't know what you're talking about. Um,
Mm.
in retrospect, the advice that he gave, I really should have followed. Don't ever go into the restaurant business. I would tell people the same thing today. Uh, so if we want to know what lessons I learned from the experience, it was don't go into the restaurant business. But there were so many other lessons. They were successful, thankfully. But I learned, you know, my wife and I did all the tenant improvements on the space that we leased.
Mhm.
So I learned how to negotiate a commercial lease. I learned how to do demolition. I learned how to do framing, plumbing, electrical. I mean, we built the whole thing. We even built all the tables for the restaurant, the countertops. We
Oh,
did everything.
wow.
And so I got a really great education and development, construction, made a lot of mistakes on both of those things along the way. And as we did other restaurants, we then hired people to do it. And it was disappointing to see that somebody could come in and frame an entire restaurant in a day. And it had taken me 3 months to do the same job.
Mm,
So I
yeah.
learned the value of delegation and hiring professionals. Um, but ultimately, I think what I learned is that if I put my mind to something, that I could do it.
Mhm.
And we did. And then, you know, there came a time where that business was a lot less fun. And once we started having kids and we weren't doing that together all day, every day,
Yeah.
it was a lot less fun for me to be gone 16 or 18 hours a day. So we sold the restaurants and moved on to other ventures. So,
Wow. I'm sure that is a lot of responsibility starting at 22 and then to know you were also married. But I like how the partnership came where you two worked collectively so that it could thrive during the time that it did, but you also knew when to bow out gracefully, so as to speak. And so as time goes on, Alan, you are be truly becoming more and more entrepreneurial savvy. You're a husband, you're a father, you're active in, other things. And so somebody from the outside looking in can say, wow, this is the all American dream. Life was going well, going perfect, but you're still a human being. And during those years, some challenges came that really got down to the core and the matter and the heart of who you are and how you weather storms. So take us to a moment, Alan, because people see the success in people and have no idea of the cost it took to get there or where they are. But take us to a time during these years of your entrepreneurial journey where behind the scenes you were being transformed from pain into purpose. Take us there.
yeah, really great question. And I'm going to start at the most pivotal moment, and
Mhm.
then I'll go backwards in time until how I
Sure.
got there.
Yeah.
Um, Ultimately, the most pivotal moment of my life is also probably the one that, not probably, it definitely is one where I would hope that nobody else has to get to. And that was in outside of Phoenix. There's a small regional park, and I would mountain bike there. I'd hiked there for years, but this particular day, I was at that regional park, sitting in my truck and looking at my handgun and considering the end of my life.
Mhm.
And you know, you talk about the American dream, and certainly I had lived that. Um, and what brought me to that point was a series of events that really undid me mentally, emotionally. Um, in retrospect, I I would have been okay financially and in every other way, but it didn't feel like it then. It felt like everything was collapsing. And what led to that was in 2018, we found out that my mother-in-law had cancer,
Mm.
and a week later, we lost her.
Wow.
And um, you know, my mother-in-law and my wife were best friends. They walked together every morning. They lived a mile away from us. We saw them almost every day. Really a great relationship with them. And the shock of that loss is just difficult. Anybody that's lost a parent or, heaven forbid, a child or someone that they love knows what kind of a shock that can be. And this certainly was all of that. Um, I'm certain that my father-in-law never recovered from that loss. And 13 months later, well, actually, within a few months, his cancer came back and led
Oh.
to several surgeries and hospitalization. And 13 months after that, his cancer ruptured his carotid artery, and we found him bleeding to death on his kitchen floor.
Mm.
And prior to this, he and I had had a conversation, and he didn't want anyone else giving him any pain medication. And so I asked him if he'd like for me to give him something. He said he would. I called a family member who was a paramedic, and I said, "Hey, here's the situation. What do I do?" And his response was, "On the counter, there are these two medications. You're going to fill the syringe." He goes, "You need to know in advance that this giving him these doses, he'll pass away fairly quickly, but it's the most merciful thing you can do."
Mhm.
And so that is what I did. Um, and I would still make the same decision today.
Mhm.
Um, However, there's no way to anticipate the toll that it
Mhm.
takes on a person to participate in the death of another person. Um, and I certainly wasn't prepared for that. There's a lot of trauma,
Mhm.
so definitely some PTSD that came from that experience. Um, and you know that those two things were probably enough by themselves. But then 13 months after that, my dad, at the young age of 66, had a massive stroke and passed away.
Mm.
And my dad and I had a great relationship. He had actually sold the interest he had in another business and partnered with me in another business. We shared an office for almost 13 years.
Mm.
And he had a stroke during COVID, and we weren't allowed to be in the hospital with him. And
Mhm.
so he passed alone. And, you know, um, the loss of three parents in 2 years, I just wasn't prepared for that. And
Mm.
I felt completely unable to deal with the the emotions. I think and maybe this is true for women as well, but definitely for men, especially in America. Your whole life you're taught big boys don't cry, just suck it
Mhm.
up. Well, I realize now that I was trying to keep a lid on all of those emotions, and
Mhm.
finally those emotions were just too big. I couldn't keep the lid on it over more. And when the lid came off, I didn't know how to deal with it. And that's ultimately where I ended up in my truck and really wanting to put an end to the pain.
Mhm.
Um, I don't think I ever wanted to end my life, but I definitely wanted the pain to stop. And those two things were inseparable at the time.
Mhm.
Um, as I've reflected back on that now, it's interesting to me that the very thing that took me to that place was also the thing that saved me.
Mhm.
And as I was sitting there, two words came into my mind. Now, you could believe that that was circumstance or chance. You could believe in, the universe or whatever. I believe that it was God reaching out and
Yeah.
working a miracle in me.
Mhm.
But I just heard two words. I heard "be there." And now those two words are the screensaver on my phone. And I recognized in those words that I was there because people that I loved weren't going to be there for weddings. They weren't going to be there for Christmases or Thanksgivings. And that was painful. I also recognized in that moment that if I took the next step and did what I was thinking about, that I would perpetuate that pain and that I would pass that on to my kids. And I wasn't willing to do that. And so that's what saved me. And that was the beginning of what's become a lot of work over the last, this was 5 years ago, of really rebuilding every aspect of my life. During that time period, I walked away. My business at the time was doing $16 million a year. and I walked away from it. Um, Literally signed over ownership to a friend in exchange for $100,000, which was way less than the value of the
Wow.
business.
Yeah.
Certainly would not do the same exit today, and wouldn't advise the people that I coach to make that
Mhm.
decision either. Um, but I was doing the best that I could with the resources that I had and who I was in that moment, and so I'm sure there's a lot of places we can explore from there. But
Mhm.
you know, 5 years ago, I was at the end of my life, and
Mhm.
the last 5 years have been a consistent work on myself
Yeah.
to become someone and something different and better. And that's what I get to help other people do.
Exactly. And we'll talk about that. I want to kind of go back a little bit because something you said hit me and struck me. And I don't know if you've ever seen this movie. Have you happened to ever see It's a Wonderful Life or know the premise of it?
I've seen it, but I'm going to let you remind
Okay,
everyone the
yeah. So,
premise of it
yes,
because I
yes.
think that'll
So
be important.
exactly. So, spoiler alert for anyone who's never seen the classic movie. It's aired usually Christmas time. It's a Wonderful Life, all-star cast, classic. It's one of my sister's favorite movies, but pretty much the premise of it, which makes me think of your situation, Alan, is George Bailey is the lead character, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think the late Cary Grant played him. No, James Stewart. I think it was Jimmy Stewart. Um, Either way, one of them did. I think it's Jimmy Stewart. I don't know, but either way, George Bailey is the character, and I can't believe I can't think of the actor who played him. I think it was Jimmy Stewart.
You'll
Anyway,
think of it as soon as we're
I
done
know,
recording,
right?
I'm sure.
It's either Cary Grant or him. But anyway, George Bailey is the lead character. And what happens is, he's loved, revered by so many people in his town. He had the opportunity to travel elsewhere, move elsewhere, but life happened. He stayed in his hometown and built a fabulous life. So, fast forward to it is that the whole premise of the story and why it's called It's a Wonderful Life is, without giving all details, he does come to a crossroads where he seriously contemplates and is a second away from taking his life due to something happening that you'll find out when you watch the movie that causes him to just say, there's no way out of this. This is too much to handle. And although all of the people around him love him, he's not thinking about that. And that is why I honor you for sharing your story because it can be so quick for others to judge a person who is at that almost breaking point. It can happen to the best of us, even those who have strong faith, who trust God and everything. Life can get hard and life can hurt. And in It's a Wonderful Life, the beauty of it is that he doesn't take his life, but then he comes to the awareness that he really had a wonderful life. And he thought about you. And I thought about you, Alan, in that when you heard Be There and you knew that was the voice of God speaking to you in that still small voice or whatever way, you thought about everyone else and that your life has meaning, influence, purpose, everything. And so that is why I say that comparison. And it begs the question is when you finally realize that and you took the brave step to say, okay, I'm going to give it another go. I'm going to do my best to make it through another day. Tell me about the importance that your family, in terms of your wife, kids, not specific nitty gritty details, but what was the importance of your family in that time? And what I mean by that is not even necessarily what they said to you, but how did you really come back to the awareness of how needed you actually were and are?
I don't think at that time that
Mhm.
was the awareness. It was just
Exactly.
I didn't want someone else to be hurting the way I was hurting. So I
Mhm.
didn't want to share that. Um, at at the moment, there was still so much pain. Like making the decision not to take my life didn't take away the pain.
Mhm.
That has been a series of continuing to learn and to grow over the last 5 years, and that still
Mhm.
continues. Candidly, I'm in the final 2 weeks of preparation for a bodybuilding competition. You could call that a midlife
Oh,
crisis or something. But for
congratulations.
Well,
Yes.
you say that until you hear the reality. So the last 2 weeks,
Oh.
which
Uh-huh.
I didn't know, are extremely difficult. So
Mhm.
I'm doing an hour and a half every day of cardio plus weight training, and you're doing that on a very reduced amount of
You're
calories.
hungry. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Well, beyond being hungry, at that reduced calorie level, your brain just doesn't make dopamine in
Mhm.
the same way as it would otherwise. And so, in a lot of ways, in the last week, I've been revisiting some of the depression, the anxiety,
Mhm.
some of the same feelings that I was experiencing then. The difference is I've developed the tools to deal with that in a more
Mhm.
healthy way now. And so, between you and I, before we started recording, there was some calm music and breath work going on
Mhm.
just because I was needing to get myself in a state where I was feeling up to sharing and participating. Because
Mhm.
right now I'm doing so much physical work, I'm hurting myself physically every single day,
Yeah.
um, that it can be tough on your mind. And so I share that because good times are going to come and go. And ultimately, what's come out of the last 5 years is 5 years ago, there was no separation between who I am and what I was feeling.
Mhm.
I didn't know that there was a difference, and now I know that very clearly. And through meditation, through affirmations, through exercise, through healthy eating, through reaching out to friends, lots of different tools, I can deal with that in a much more constructive way. But to go back with my family, um, it took me healing first, and really the key to that was learning to love myself.
Mhm.
Um, and once I was able to love myself, there was enough room where I could really learn to love and appreciate others better. And the reality is, my kids were going through their own journey with grief as well. They'd lost three grandparents in 2 years, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, when we lost both of my wife's parents, there was also a split in her family. And so my kids not only lost their grandparents, but also aunts and uncles and cousins,
Yeah.
because there was an end of contact between extended family and us. And so everybody was dealing with their own hurt. And I compare it to, like, if you're in a battle and there's a bomb that goes off or something, you can't deal with someone else's injuries until you've dealt with your own. And that was really the turning point, is once both my wife and I had gotten to a sufficient place in our healing journey where we could help with the kids. And then we hired a coach for each of the kids to help them deal with grief, really started educating them emotionally on how to deal with these life circumstances.
Mhm. Yeah, and I am going to encourage you that you are going to get through this period. I know a little bit about bodybuilding and things of that nature. I never did a competition, but I was slated for one in 2020, and then the
Mm.
pandemic hit. So I I
So
understand.
you know what I'm going through.
I
Yeah.
understand what you're going through, and I, of course, am very feminine, so I was training for the ones where it's like the women's physique. I didn't wanna be, like, sculpted and jacked and
Yeah.
all of that. No, I still want it to look feminine, and I don't want emails from people, ladies, if you do that kind of stuff, I'm not judging you. I'm just talking about me. But
Right.
you are absolutely right, is that it takes so much of a toll on you and just keep pressing through with that. And so, what I'd like to do as we start to come to a close, especially knowing that you are preppy, and I want to be respectful of that because that is not a game. But as we start to come to a close, is that, when you hit this crossroads point and you started to rebuild and just start taking care of yourself, and it's still a journey for all of us to just navigate one day at a time. Talk to us about the importance and the presence of having hope in spite of
Mm.
your circumstances.
Yeah, that is so important. And I would say that that was critical. So, coming out of that park, I went home and I wrote down on a note card that there were really three gifts from God that I needed. And one of them was hope and happiness. The other one was prosperity. And the last one was knowing that my life had purpose and meaning. And it, backing up to your question, I think that in that moment, it was the absence of hope that takes you there because you don't believe anything can be better.
Mhm.
And I find that now so often in conversations with other people. They've been through a divorce, or they're in a difficult job situation, or they've been fired from their job, or their business is struggling, or whatever the thing is, and they feel trapped and hopeless that the situation can never get better. And I think that it's one of the great blessings of coaching people is to be able to stand outside of that pain of the circumstance and help people find hope and
Mhm.
improve. And I don't think this was even something that we talked about in our initial conversation, but um, it's actually that is part of the premise of a book that's on my vision board that I've started
Oh.
writing. And it's a framework that anybody can use in 5 minutes to make dramatic changes to their life.
Mm.
And it's one decision, 2 words, 5 minutes. I think you can change anything in your life. So here's the 2 words. As we know, 2 words saved my life, 2 words changed my life, be there. Those are mine. But the framework is this, and the 2 words are these. The first one is I am. And whatever you put behind those 2 words, you are capable of becoming. And
Mhm.
so I want people to understand that if you stick behind those words, I am ugly, well, that's how you're gonna feel, or whatever negative thing. But you can also
Mhm.
put anything positive behind there. The next the next 2 words that will change your life is I choose. So for me, we'll use my example right now. I have on my vision board who I wanted to become through this transformation challenge of bodybuilding. And so my choice was I am healthy, I'm strong, I am fit. And now I have to attach daily decisions to that vision for myself. And those daily decisions, beginning was I just had to drive to the gym and I could check it off. I didn't even have to go inside. Right?
Yeah.
Victory was just getting out of bed and driving to the gym.
Mm.
So I am, followed by I choose. And the last one, not the last one, but the next one in this formula is I feel, is I pre-program for myself how I'm going to feel when I make decisions that move me toward my vision. So for me, it's I am healthy, I am strong, I choose to go to the gym and track my food. I feel more attractive, I feel healthy and alive. And now I've given fuel to these decisions and to this
Mhm.
vision. And the very last 2 words that I think changes anybody's life are the words thank you. And if no matter what the problem is, if we can find gratitude for it, we can eliminate the problem. And I really
Mhm.
believe that's true. I think had I been able to find gratitude for the life that I had, in spite of the pain, I don't arrive at the point where I was. And it's okay that I was there. Now that's one of the tools in the toolbox is if I'm starting to feel down on myself or negative, I
Mhm.
can step back and go, "Man, I'm so grateful that I get to feel hungry, that I get to choose
Yes.
to reduce how much I'm eating, not that I just don't have anything to eat, right?
Mhm.
I get to choose to experience this pain that I'm putting myself through at the gym, whereas other people would die for this opportunity. They would love to
Wow.
be where I'm at. And so that's what I want to help people with is in 5 minutes, decide who you're going to be, decide what decisions are going to move you in that direction, choose how you're going to feel about it, and then express gratitude. And I think you
Mm.
can change anything in your life that way.
It certainly gives another perspective. When you were saying that about I choose to X, Y, and Z, or even the concept of, it's common to look in your cabinets and say, oh, there's nothing to eat, but there's some cans of stuff. It might not be what we want to eat, but there's something to eat. But to change the perspective and being grateful for what I have and where I am definitely gives the inspiration to keep going. And I can only imagine how you serve your clients in that way. So, without giving all of your trade secrets, Alan, tell us about how you continue to get your clients to not only learn and know more about themselves, but how do you also ingrain in them to keep hope in their lives? Is it through that same framework, or is it in a different way since it's a coaching and client situation?
Well, the framework is similar. So I
Mhm,
invite them to participate in activities where we look at the reality of who they are without judgment.
mhm,
And one of those things, and I don't think this is sharing a trade secret, and even if it were, I'm happy to share, um, is to invite them to stand outside of their life and look at if I were doing this with you, let's look at your entire life as if you were another person looking at you and tell me what the highlight reel is. What have
mhm,
you accomplished? Who are the relationships that you've had? And let's just acknowledge that without telling any other story behind it. And, I invite people, if you were introducing you to a crowd of 10,000 people, you're
mhm.
going to give a keynote address on the success, the accomplishments of your life. What would that look like? And because a lot of us don't celebrate ourselves, even, I sold the business. Well, I didn't stop and say, hey, great job, Alan. I hadn't learned how to do that yet.
Wow.
But now, guess what? Every day that I leave the gym, I mentally imagine me walking in the door and giving myself a high five and just saying, hey, great job, dude. You showed up today. Yeah, you're
Wow.
tired, you're sweaty. This was hard, but you did it. Let's celebrate that.
Mhm,
So I actually had a friend who said, hey, when you're working with somebody, if they don't do the work that you're asking them to do you ever like come down on them? Are you? And I'm like, no, like they do that to themselves. Like
mhm.
every single one of us has that inner self that whips us with shame. Like that's not my job as a coach. My job is to help them identify that thing that's whipping them and get rid of that guy so we can get rid of the guy that celebrates them.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, the number one thing that everybody wants in this world is love. And
Yeah.
so if I can show up and regardless of how much they succeeded or how much they failed that week and offer them love for who they are, well, I can get them to where they want to go. I'm not worried about that. That's been repeated over and over and over again. I know it's going to happen, but they don't always know that. And so I just have to continue to encourage and invite and let them know that, hey, yeah, you wanted to earn $10,000 this week and you did five. Okay, great. Let's
Mhm.
celebrate that. I love you for
Yeah.
that. Now let's work on how we get the other five next week.
That's right. Wow. I love that, Alan. I really do. And so the question now is what's next for Alan Underwood in terms of hope? What does hope manifested and coming into reality in your life look like in this present moment and what's to come?
It looks like carbohydrates. That's what that.
That's right. Let's
It
say it.
looks like French toast in 2 weeks. That's what that looks like.
It does.
Um, you know, I already know what that looks like. I'm a huge believer in vision boards, and yeah,
Uh-huh.
I would love to turn the camera around and share, but I have in front of me the vision board that I created for this year.
Mm.
It has a vision of who I wanted to be as a person, who I want to be as a spouse and as a partner, who I want to be physically, who I want to be financially, who I want to be as a dad, what bucket list adventures I want to have. Um, the funny thing is that I outgrew that vision, so I had to create another one. So now I have a
Ooh.
second vision board, and
Oh,
maybe this answers your question, but on that vision board are a TED Talk. On that vision board is
yes.
writing a book.
Yes.
Neither one of those things had ever been an idea really up until the last 2 or 3 months. And if you want to know why that is, it's because I think that there is someone else who is just like me 5 years ago, going through what they think is the worst period of their life. And the reality is that all of us at some point are going to go to rock bottom. And
Mhm.
that's great news because every single building is built on the foundation, right? And until you get down to bedrock, you really can't build the building that you want. For those who, like me, are believers, when you get down to the rock, well, the rock of our salvation is Christ, right?
That's
And
right. Yeah.
and that's who we always find when we get to rock bottom.
Hmm.
It might have a different name or different belief for somebody, and that's okay. But that's what we find there. And then what I want that person to know is that they're at the end of their life, but it's not the end that they think. They're at the front end of the best part of their life. It just doesn't feel like it today. And if they just give a little bit of time, we apply a little bit of tools, shifts the mindset, they're going to be able to achieve whatever they want to achieve, have whatever they want to have, do whatever they want to do, um, because that's already within them. They're already capable of it. And I just need to help people see that themselves.
And Alan, based on that answer, you already have a part of your book already because that right there about the foundation and who we are, that was powerful and it is the truth. And I thank you also. Listen, all of my subscribers and viewers and listeners know I am a believer. If that's not what they believe, that's fine. But they know I will unashamedly talk about Jesus. And yes, that is the foundation, and I am just so glad that you know that and you help people. And suppose someone's listening to this and say, I want to learn more about Alan. I would love to connect with him. How can people connect with you? Say that they want to, be a possible client or want to do business with you, or even learn more about your nonprofit in terms of the flights. How can they contact you?
That's great. The easiest way is thealanunderwood.com.
Mm.
So at that website, they're going to find links that will take them to investing, coaching, keynote speaking, aviation. So one stop shop, thealanunderwood.com.
And Alan, as a closing question, I know that you heard be there, but based on who you are now, if that man those 5 years ago who was at rock bottom, you were to come to you today as a client and they just needed a word of encouragement and hope, something, what would you say to that old version of yourself?
Yeah.
Mm.
And, I touched on this earlier and I know we're wrapping up, but the journey of learning to love myself has been the greatest journey of my life.
Mm.
And is the greatest journey that any of your listeners can take. And if they don't know how to do that, I would love to have a conversation. Happy to walk them through how I discovered that. It may be different for them, and that's okay. But learning to love myself, and that was part of the process of actually going back to the person I didn't love and just saying, "Hey, Alan, I love you just the way you are right now. You helped me become who I am today." So, um, and doing that will change your life and it will change the world.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Power Transformation Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow or subscribe, leave a 5-star rating, and write a review. It helps us inspire even more listeners. And don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who could use a little power in their transformation. Until next time, keep bouncing back, keep rising, and be good to yourself and to others.